My name is Maya Morena. I am an undocumented immigrant. I'm a sex worker. I used to work at massage parlors. I was smuggled here when I was 5 years old by my parents. They had to pay $10,000 to be smuggled here. I was a DACA kid, so when in 2012, Obama passed DACA, which allows me to work legally and allows me to drive in this country. So the thing about working at massage parlors for me was that it was a way to increase my safety. I was around people who were part of my community. They were usually immigrants. They offered to let me sleep there and stay at the place because a lot of immigrants cannot afford the rent, and a lot of them come from precarious situations, so for them that is a way to save money. They usually live around and work with people who speak the same language that they do. So not being able to speak English is not exactly a sign that they're being exploited. It is a great way to build community, especially for immigrants. If you see them working in the back of pizza places or fast food chains or in the fields, they often speak their own language with their community. This is normal. I feel that whenever I hear the word human trafficking, it is a very traumatizing word for me. Because usually when people say human trafficking, it means that they're going to persecute immigrants, they're going to close the borders, they're going to increase surveillance, they are going to increase policing, and they're going to go after people like me who are immigrants, who are poor, who are sex workers. It is very interesting to me for me to research the sex trafficking organizations in the state of Florida and also in the state, in various states in the US, because they all have similar programs. A lot of them are Christian programs, others are work programs. So they sell different goods and they work with various corporations, such as Amazon, all the corporations that you normally use, and a percentage of that goes toward the programs that put these sex workers to work. They have been doing this kind of reformatory schools for prostitutes for over a century now. It's included in my list of books that I recommend you read. They have always ended in failure. The women often run away. These programs are horrible. They're exploitative. They take their pictures and tell you that the way to end human trafficking is to shop. Is to shop at massive corporations that are creating monopolies and that treat their workers horribly. My parents have had to suffer for this country. They have had to pick and work in the fields, picking food for people's lavish lives, working cheap labor, and working in exploitative conditions most Americans don't want to work. They don't call that trafficking, even though they had no choice. According to them, my parents are criminals. And that is one of the reasons why I will never call myself a human trafficking victim, even though I had no say in the way that my life has been set up for me. And the reason is because once you call yourself a human trafficking victim, someone has to be held responsible. So in this case, my parents would be the traffickers and they would be in prison despite the fact that they have broken their backs for me for the past decade.
I am Gabrielle Monroe, she, her. I am with SWAT Behind Bars. I am a childhood sex trafficking survivor. I am also a consensual sex worker. And had I walked into a police station and told my story, they would have arrested me for prostitution and let my abuser go. That is wrong. In Florida, the cops are allowed to have sexual contact and even participate in sexual actions with alleged prostitutes in order to obtain a non-violent, victimless crime arrest. So let me put that in plain words. Florida cops are raping sex workers in order to arrest them for normal, consensual adult activities. Rape should never be a form of rescue. If you have to rape someone in order to rescue them, you're doing it wrong. We can't fix the problems until we start to talk about it. Rape is never a form of rescue. Cops do not have the right to rape. It's already a law, and you're not above it.
Woo! Woo!
Rape is not rescue. We want help, not handcuffs. How much of that money that was wrapped up in charging folks with consensual adult activities could have went to saving true trafficking survivors? I believe in my heart that not all cops are bad people. In fact, I think a very small portion of police are bad people. But in the days of social media, in this mass communication and organization that we have happening, can you really call yourself a good cop if you refuse to stand up against the abuse in your own ranks? Woo! Mm-hmm. It is time for the good cops to work with sex workers to create safe spaces so true sex trafficking victims could seek the resources when they're ready.
Yes! Yes!
Yep. Well, my name is Sasha Benjamin, and I am a 26-year-old consensual sex worker. I have been working for about 6 years by choice with my own body, doing as I please. I came to Florida in 2012 to go to college and become a nurse like my mother, but in 2015 I was arrested in a sting. So instead of collecting that $500 to go towards my $2,000 bucks, I ended up having to post a $1,000 bail, retain a lawyer for $3,000, and of course to this day, with a public record of prostitution, you can only imagine the looks that I get if I try to apply to a 9 to 5. That's kind of out the door now. But when I was arrested in the sting, one thing that interested me was they tried to put everyone in this box. They didn't understand that by choice I was a sex worker. By choice I want to do this. And no, I'm not harmed, and yes, I feel safe. So they would ask me questions like, well, who forced you into this work? And I happily said, nobody. What do you mean? Or who are you here with? Do you work with any other girls? Are you harmed, or are you in danger? No, I'm not actually, and I'm kind of offended that you're asking me all these questions. I'm telling you, I'm here by choice. I'm happy, and I'd appreciate if you guys get these cameras out of my face, because there was cameras there as well. And that whole ordeal kind of changed my mindset on what the hell is going on in America. And I do wish that when laws are made about us, that you include us in these laws. Stop the arrest, and please eliminate handcuffs if your goal is to...
All eyes are on Florida because of Robert Kraft's high-profile hand job. But what we know is that after the Juniper police threw themselves a press conference calling themselves heroes for rescuing women, all 13 women were handcuffed, detained, and are now facing multiple felony charges. That's not a rescue. That's a travesty. What do we want?
Help, not handcuffs!
What do we want?
Help, not handcuffs!
Just what?
Stop the arrest!
We know that Robert Kraft is a billionaire and a high-profile person. And we also know that these state-funded stings are happening all over the country. And they're targeting women. And they're targeting immigrants. And they're targeting trans people. And they're targeting people of color. They're not helping anybody. They're putting them in fucking handcuffs. What do we want?
Help, not handcuffs!
What do we want?
Help, not handcuffs!
Sex workers all over the world are organizing for their rights. They're begging governments, state governments, all over the world to stop arresting women in the name of protecting them. Prostitution was not criminalized in this country until the early 1900s. They outlawed sex work at the same time that they outlawed abortion and alcohol, all in the name of protecting us from our own choices. But we're here to call bullshit. We are not taking this anymore. Sex sex workers are standing up here, they're standing up in New Hampshire, they're standing up in Rhode Island, they're standing up in Seattle, they're standing up in New York, they're standing up all over the country to say, stop it.
Hi, I'm Kim Porteous, and I'm currently the Vice President of Greater Orlando Now, and I am running for Florida President of Now next week. Now is the national organization for women.
All women.
We're the largest advocacy group for women and girls, and I am proud to stand here. I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to listen to sex workers. We can't do anything if we're not going to listen to them first. They must be listened to. And I'm also, as a feminist, sick and tired of people attacking women while 99% of rapists go free. They're arresting sex workers. That's wrong. And we have to take a stand. We have to take a stand for our most marginalized community. This is not a time to put your moral beliefs. This is real. This is people's lives. It's consensual. We should be supporting consensual acts, not arresting workers. And we also need to be dealing with the sexual abuse we have in our country. It seems like the more women take a stand, the more marginalized women are attacked. And we've been in the Me Too time frame. We're here at the Never Again, all of this now. And what's turning out is we're attacking women, and they're standing alone. So I ask my feminists to stand up with sex workers. So I don't want to hear anybody get on a high horse about what a consensual person does with their own body. So I could go on about rape statistics, I could go on, but what I want to say is I'm proud to be here, and I'm proud to listen to sex workers.
My name is Diana Shanks. I organize with SWAP Tampa and Sex Worker Solidarity Network. In 2017, a week-long undercover sting that targeted sex workers in Polk County ended with 277 arrests. Sheriff Grady Judd boasted, quote, "That's the most we have ever arrested in the history of the Sheriff's Office." This wildly expensive initiative was pitched as an anti-trafficking campaign, and yet no human trafficking victims were freed. This happened again in Polk County last December. 103 arrests. But this time they did find an underage girl who was being trafficked. So what did they do with this child that they were supposedly rescuing? Gave her a drug charge, so now she can spend the rest of her life with a criminal record that she got when she was put under arrest by police officers who thought they were doing her a favor. Being jailed can disqualify you from certain assistance programs. It can cause you to lose custody of your children. It renders you homeless if you are working to pay rent. Who is helped by this? Whose life gets improved when we spend all this money on policing and imprisoning citizens? This kind of punitive policing does not help our communities. If a violator did have a mainstream job, they certainly wouldn't after months in jail. When a sex worker, coerced or consensual, acquires an arrest record to deter them from prostitution, this creates a cycle that keeps them in prostitution. Who's going to employ someone who just got out of jail on prostitution charges? Well, our politicians and police forces, after they condemn them to a cycle of prostitution or illegal methods of making money by rendering them unhireable? Throwing people in jail does nothing but spend taxpayer dollars on incarcerating people who are not hurting anybody. If you're interested in keeping people from feeling like they have to break the law just to get their bills paid, that's a discussion that is so much bigger than throwing people in jail. We do not need heroes. And I say heroes because that's the acronym our federal government came up with their Human Exploitation Rights Ordinance of 2015, an anti-trafficking task force of ex-military funded so ironically by ICE. In 2012, Alaska passed a law that redefined prostitution as sex trafficking. The only 2 people charged in the first 2 years of the law were sex workers caught in ordinary prostitution stings. One was literally charged with sex trafficking herself because the state decided that she aided in her own prostitution. The other woman was charged with multiple counts of felony sex trafficking because she booked a threesome for herself and other consensual sex workers for a police officer posing as a client. After 6 years of policing this way, Alaska has not charged anyone with coercion, deception, or force relating to trafficking, and no children have been rescued. Homeland Security formally bans entry to anyone who has sold sex in the last 10 years as part of the same provision that bans spies, Nazis, and terrorists. Sex work has always been a tool that marginalized people use for upward mobility, specifically women, undocumented workers, people escaping abusive situations, those with no access to mental health resources or a formal education, and the trans community. Sex work's intersectional accessibility to marginalized populations is what's kept it an international profession for most of human history. It's also why sex workers are such a disproportionate target of violence, and why it's easy to exploit them. They're often already marginalized. But this is also why sex workers are invaluable contributors to legislation and initiatives to help curb exploitation like trafficking. Every study shows this. With crime, with drug use, and with sex work, the common thread is always poverty. The median income in that Florida town I grew up in is roughly $17,000 a year. So of course people are doing sex work. They're trying to feed their kids. We can disagree about the ethics of consensual sex work. A really great thing about society is that we can differentiate between things we think people shouldn't do and things we think we should actively use our tax dollars to criminalize and incarcerate. This is not the time for parlance about if sex workers are functioning as a byproduct of patriarchy, or if they respect themselves, or if adult consensual sex work is empowering. People are going to jail. Police officers are getting paid tax dollars to touch women illegally and then arresting them for allowing it. So if you think your local sheriff's office should stop allocating so much money towards arresting, incarcerating, lying, and sexually assaulting an already marginalized population, and more on, I don't know, processing rape kits or something, you have to take action. Sex work is inextricably connected to feminism, the prison industrial complex, race relations, the housing crisis, disability justice, border control, labor rights, and poverty. So if you care about literally any disenfranchised group, this is your fight. People are dying, and there is no justice. Not yet.
Not yet.
My name is Christine Hannibin. I'm a trained victim advocate with a Master's of Social Work from UCF, and I'm a community organizer with 2 chapters of the Sex Workers Outreach Project, Swap Behind Bars and Swap Orlando. I'm an ally and advocate for sex workers and their human rights. No one is more committed to ending violence and exploitation in the sex industry, or knowledgeable about how to do it, than sex workers. The police and state attorneys have spent months claiming they were investigating and prosecuting for human trafficking. They admitted a week ago there's no evidence to bring charges. I was raised to trust the police and see them as good guys. But in these cases, they did not help these women and should not be celebrated as heroes.
That's right.
So far, 13 women have been arrested, with warrants out for 4 more. Half of the women are still in physical custody, unable to afford their bonds or quality legal representation. All are being charged with felonies. This is state-sanctioned sexual assault. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. In 2015, an inventory of Florida's sexual assault kits found that 13,435 kits had never been submitted for analysis. We must end the backlog on testing rape kits, stop rapists from raping, end rape by police, and stop arresting people for consensual sex. If our lawmakers want to address human trafficking, they should listen to sex workers and just stop the arrests. When law enforcement agencies and state attorneys threw themselves press conferences to declare themselves heroes in the spa stings, most of the media took them at their word. The media repeated their unsubstantiated speculation and salacious details. They focused on powerful men's sex lives. Very few have asked, what about the women? Instead, they publish names, mugshots, and personal details, and they're trying to release even more. They are hurting these women, not helping them. People in the sex industry need rights, not rescue.
Woo!